All right, good evening, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Current Events on Tap, a podcast with the Alex Curse Project. If this is your first time, be sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. On this show, the current events, like the drinks, are on the house. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm still dealing with a little bit of the bout of COVID I had last week. That's why I couldn't go live last week. We are currently streaming live on YouTube, Twitch, and the X platform. The format of the show is as follows. I bring one or more guests on the show. We talk beer or beverage of choice and current events of the week. Each person will discuss their beverage of choice, and for this whole hour, whether it could be alcoholic or non-alcoholic, essentially. It does not matter. Then each person will cover two current events of their choosing. They give the current event, then they give their assessment, then each person gets a chance to give their assessment, and then we discuss. Debate may be possible, but rest assured you are in good faith zone and you will get your chance to get your point across. The point of this is a space for all of us to discuss the issue and what we think of it and keep an open mind to what the other person has to say. And without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on our current guest. Go ahead.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is Tyberius D. It's a pleasure to be here for the first time. Alex has been a great friend of mine, and I'm happy to be here on his show.
And I am very, very thankful. You were definitely a last-minute guest, but you know what? I never forget my friends, and I always forget. You're always gracious enough to bring me on your podcast, which I'm always glad. It's always a good discussion we have there. I mean, we talk about politics, we talk about geopolitics, we talk about science fiction stuff. I mean, what can I say? We're all nerds around this neck of the woods and stuff. I love talking about science fiction stuff, though. So, but yeah,
I'm definitely a nerd, so you all give me a run for my money on that one.
Yep. So what do you usually talk about in your podcast? Just kind of give everybody a bit of a background, essentially.
Yeah, we've changed up quite a bit. It originally started back in 2018 as a show called The Conversation. It was literally about politics, and it was about how the political system was slowly pulling itself apart to where, we had a lot of people who were having trouble being in the moderates or in the centrist zone. And, we kept seeing the more polarization where we'd talk to some people. It's like, 2018 is going to be the red wave or it's going to be the blue wave. And you really couldn't talk to your neighbors about that. And, unfortunately, it's only gotten worse from here. So
yeah.
Outside of that, we've evolved and we've changed over time. I'm kind of at the point where I'm debating on if I'm going to continue writ large because the communities that I've been a part of for a while, such as the Twitch politics, it has unfortunately just kind of gone off the deep end and has largely died out because people went back to work or, found lives. I recently got a new job where I'm happy to, work 50 hours a week to build up my own business. So I'm basically got it on burner right now. I was figuring out how much I actually want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get it, because, I kind of took a bit of a hiatus, because I used to do, this platform. I used to do strictly audio, but I felt it was boring, because it's just me talking. That's why I wanted to bring on additional people to kind of, make the conversations a little bit more interesting, and, that way, I'm not just talking about current events. I bring somebody else to talk about other kinds of current events and stuff like that. Kind of keep it interesting,
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, before we go on to get into current events, do you have a beverage of the week, or are you just drinking water, or tea, or whatnot?
Usually just a little bit of water. I actually don't even have a beverage on me at the moment.
That's okay.
Long story about the drinkage. Usually I would drink either tea or Dr. Pepper, but I was able to kick my caffeine addiction last month when I got COVID, and I've been able to kind of, I basically limit myself if I'm ever going to have any to just one a day. And outside of, I think, one soda this week, I had been, if you will, sober for the better part of 2 weeks.
There you go.
Yeah, it's something I've kicked. It's definitely something I'm itching at. I definitely wanted one last night. I was just, I need some Dr. Pepper, but I'm quite curious to see how my health goes.
No, I get it, because last week, I said, that was my first bout with COVID, so I didn't drink any beers. My main liquid diet was Pedialyte, water, hot tea, and NyQuil, basically. That's what I was basically dealing with. So yesterday I had a beer for the first time in about a week and a half. But tonight's beer of the week I'm actually drinking is, I bought this at Costco. It's Tsingtao. It's Chinese beer, basically. It's actually not bad. Now, usually what I would do is I go into context about the history of the beer, but I'm not going to do that anymore because I don't think anybody really found that interesting. But I bought this at Costco. It's actually not bad. It kind of in a way reminds me of a Corona in a way. It's got that taste to it, but it's not got the yellowish color to it, though. It's not bad, though. I mean, I would recommend it to anybody. But
So it's not Yingling. That's what you're telling me.
it's definitely not Yingling. Yingling is one of my favorite mass-produced beers, and I wish I could review that because I love Yingling. Like I, I could drink Yingling like warm. And that's how I judge a good beer is if I drink it at room temperature, or if it's cold. That's what I call a good beer.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely more of the smoking variation. I just don't do very well as a drunk, unfortunately. You get me
That's
a little
fair.
inebriated, and I'm kind of an asshole. So
That's fair. You know, that's why I say it's like, you know, alcoholic beverages are not required. They're just, you know, that's just how I operate, though. I just like to talk beer and I like to talk politics, you know, or current events or what have you. So, but anyway,
100%.
yeah. So anyway, we'll go ahead and just jump right into the current events. So, the first current event I'm going to cover is on January 10th in Elyria, Ohio. Elyria police conducted a raid on a suspected house where they had a warrant of a suspect that had been suspected of stealing firearms. The problem is, however, the house they raided on, the suspect was not living there and had not lived there in over a year. Courtney Price, the woman that was living there, had just moved to Elyria from Kentucky and was at home with her 17-month-old son, Waylon. Now, Waylon has a pre-existing condition called pulmonary hypertension. It's a severe lung disease and atrial septal defect, which means there's a hole that's in his heart. The child at the time of the raid was on a ventilator. And at 2:12 p.m., the police in full riot gear arrived at the house, banged on the door, announced police, search warrant, opened the door. The footage captured that was on the Ring camera showed a few things. For starters, within 10 seconds, the police busted down the door with the battering ram, and flashbangs were deployed. One blew out a window.
Jesus.
Yeah, one window was blown out, which claims that the mother said that the baby was nearby the door and caused further damage to the baby. And at the essentially, like, they arrested the mother. She was upstairs at the time. She didn't have a chance to really answer the door. And by the time she came down here, the police had arrested her, taken her outside, and the baby was still inside. She said, "Hey, my infant son is inside. He's got a pre-existing condition." And the police said that the baby was fine. They brought paramedics over. The baby wasn't seriously hurt. But then the next day, the mother took the baby to Rainbow Babies Hospital. And the doctor stated that the child had chemical pneumonitis, I probably butchered that, which is inflammation of the lungs and irritation of the lungs, and had chemical reactions to the eyes, which is a result of the flashbang, essentially. Now, police insisted that the child was in no immediate danger, and they said that they had followed proper procedure, but the Ring camera says it's different. Like, within 10 seconds, like they say it's between 6 and 9 seconds, they beat down the door, essentially. Now, police initially insisted they had the right location, but there's even a cop on there that says, "Oh shit, this is the wrong house." And the landlord even said that the police had come to that location saying, "This guy doesn't live here anymore." They said this like repeatedly, like multiple times, even before this raid took place. Now, Elyria police insisted they did no wrong. The raid was carried out by the numbers, but it just seems as though this happens entirely too often. Like, there's multiple cases we can kind of go in there. I mean, we even talk about, like, the Breonna Taylor, for example, where it wasn't even the right guy that they found the house, and, like, all they heard was just, like, somebody breaking down the door. Now, granted, that's a different situation, but they're kind of similar in a way. Now, I look at this in this aspect, right? This could either be just negligence or complete incompetence on the parts of the police department, because when you're breaking down a door, you have got to be right when it comes down to break down, because if it's not, it's going to be like an absolute PR nightmare, because then you've got people that have post-traumatic stress from this, then you got people that have a lack of trust within the police after this, and then little on the fact that now you've just got it like, you know, it's like, "Hey, listen, I'm sorry," or bad. But again, the trust with the police just kind of goes out, especially in that neighborhood, because something like this does not just go away over time. I mean, look what happened in Uvalde. Like, the reputation of the police down there is completely destroyed. In a situation like this, it's definitely a different story. I mean, that's just basically kind of like how I'm seeing it. I mean, I understand that people make mistakes. I know there are people that are not perfect. But in a situation like this, don't you think it's like, come on, dude, did anybody, like, do any follow-up? Did anybody just, like, where was the follow-through on this to make sure that this does not happen, essentially? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here because, one, I don't have the statistics to tell you, like, how often, like, you know, we actually do a deploy SWAT anyway. But also, whenever, you know, how many of these are actually, you know, the incorrect address and property. I would definitely advise, even without those, let's just say this, I would definitely advise, even without those numbers, like SWAT has to be careful now. And it sucks because the whole role of SWAT is that while it's special weapons and tactics, they're basically, they're literally like sending in the Rangers, right? You want them to kick down the door and get in and out as quickly as possible. And it's literally a shock and awe campaign that you're waging on somebody who may be a potential assailant, adversary, whatever word you want to use. Well, we also live in an era where, people can just call in, hey, this guy's got a gun at this location. And it's actually that you're a streamer and you pissed somebody off when you were talking and they figured out where you live.
Swatting.
Yeah, we literally call it swatting. It's an awful thing. It's happened to public officials. However, when that happens, all hell starts breaking loose. So that kind of gets put down. But it's happened to personalities. Literally, a guy that I like to listen to every now and again. Like, he has had to call his police department, and he tells everyone that streams to do this. Call your local police department, let them know like who you are and your address, and tell them, hey, there's a chance that somebody may call SWAT in, so please put this on your file. Make sure to like call me or do something before you try to bust down my door, because this is a likelihood. It's true. It's just legitimately true. So, unfortunately, the police have been weaponized in people's domestic quarrels, and the worst part is that somebody who's literally on the other side of the country can call them in. So diligence is necessary.
Yes.
On the other side of that, like the role of what they're doing, I don't think needs to be questioned. Like what they do is incredibly important and necessary. So I don't want to dissuade from that. I guess if there's anything to learn here, number one, was it an accident, and was that accident through just happenstance, or was it negligence? I can't tell you for sure. Like the Breonna Taylor one's a lot better in my opinion, because at least they had the right address. They got the guy they were going after. The problem is she was collateral, right? So it's just one of those deals where we can really get into the weeds as far as how bad this goes. But the long and the short, at least for me, is this is necessary. There's going to be mistakes, but there's also levels to where, are we having too many mistakes? Are we seeing this consistently in news headlines? I don't know for sure, because I'm not like one of the police watchdogs. I'm a NACSEC voter. I'm looking at a few other things, but it seems to be happening once a year, and that's a little troubling in some regards.
Yeah. In a situation like this, like, I completely detest swatting. I think doxing and swatting is an absolutely abhorrent thing, because there's actually been records of people dying as a result of this, which is, the fact that, the streamer that you talk about, like, actually has to call the police department and say, hey, listen, I'm going to be streaming, people might send a SWAT team after me, just so you know, I'm not a bad guy kind of deal. The fact we actually have to get to that point is, it's insanity to think about. And I don't think anybody should ever have to worry about things like that, but, we now live in a digital age here. I think my biggest problem with this is the fact that police had already been warned that this guy doesn't live here anymore. And I'm just wondering, where was the failure of communication here? Where does the disconnect come in, where prior police officers have been to this location and the paperwork did not get filed, and somebody's like, hey, wait a second, this guy doesn't live here anymore, but they didn't realize that until they were already at the house. And one guy's like, this is not the right house, when they realize that. I mean, and, it's the fact that, a 17-month-old child and this mother now, like, the mother has post-traumatic stress from this probably. And let alone the fact that a 17-month-old child, I mean, I don't know how much this is going to damage it, because this happened on the 10th and it's now the 20th. So we don't know what the situation is with it now. But it's just like, and this is not a crack on the police department. I'm not anti-cop. I just want there to be accountability, because, as somebody that has, worked overseas, when you make a mistake, it damages the reputation of you over there, and it's really, really hard to gain that credibility back. And I know people will make mistakes, but I just wonder, what are they going to do to kind of fix this? Like I said, I mean, like, how do police fix the reputation here? I mean, you kind of see where I'm coming from here.
Well, I do get you. There's levels to where I absolutely agree with you that if you're any kind of operator, you have to be as diligent as you can. The problem that I have consistently is, and this reflects both ways, we live in what I think is an antitrust society at this point. So there's a lot of times where the left hand and the right hand in employment and in operations don't talk to each other anymore. Oh, that's not my job, or oh, well, he should know that, or it's wild to me. It absolutely is wild to me, the level of almost disdain that we have towards talking, engaging, and communicating with our fellow man, or our fellow human beings. Sure. People don't know shit that they should know right off the gate, and like you know how bad it is with communication.
Oh,
like
yeah.
if y'all don't get those coordinates right, you don't double check. Somebody gets an artillery shell dropped on their head. Like we don't, and just because I know your background.
Yeah.
That some of this stuff is not something you could fuck up. But a lot of people have this idea that because they work in an office job or because they do some of these other things, like, oh, there's not really a risk. But the problem is these things keep adding up.
Yeah.
And what I consistently find over and over and over again, and it's not just police, it's literally anywhere and everywhere, is that the left hand doesn't tie to the right hand enough. And we're getting to a point where, I'm not saying we're having a total system failure, but we're having cascading failures to where you see these people go to Congress and he's the CEO and he doesn't know shit about what's going on, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, testify what happened here. This literally goes back to the BP thing back in 2010. I remember this well. No one knows what's going on.
Yep.
Doesn't matter if you're a higher up. Doesn't matter if you're the guy on the ground floor. No one's talking to each other. No one's communicating. And so, like, as much as I can say, hey, police, you got to do better. That's the easy thing. Mm-hmm. Here's the hard part. We all got to do better. Mm-hmm. We all need to communicate better. We all need to be more patient with each other, and I know it sucks because we're trying to run around, raise the kids, pay for all the stuff that's inflated up 20 or 30%. Life's stressful in hell. I get it, but I'm gonna take a book out of the Christians on this one. Be patient, be humble to your fellow man, be caring and kind to them, because if you don't, all hell breaks loose.
What do you think the repercussions of this is gonna affect the police department in the future? I mean, do you think anything's gonna happen? Do you think maybe they're just gonna,
Locally, no. Or I'm sorry, locally, yeah. There'll be some flames. There might be somebody who gets fired. I'm not sure on that one. Nationally, most people aren't even talking about this issue. I was surprised to see it in the list. But it is also something good to talk about. Just kind of keep that refresher that it does happen. Mm-hmm. What I think there needs to be, and this is why I don't like to comment on these kind of things, sure, even with reading articles, is that I'm not a person with the authority and the vested ability to subpoena. Mm-hmm. I want, I hate talking about trials. I hate talking about any of these things when I don't have the ability to bring people who should know or do know in front of me and say, what are you doing? What went wrong? What do you need to do better? What do they need to do better? You know me. I can grill people. I can get the heart of the matter, and I can usually do it pretty quickly.
Sure.
But if I don't have that ability, I think it's fair to other people not to just go out here and be like, this person did this wrong, and this person did this wrong, and this person did this wrong, when I don't have the facts, and I don't have that ability to get the facts with the diligence that I think is required.
And that's fair. It's just it is very easy for us all to just kind of sit in judgment. Yeah, criticize and things like that, right? It's easy for us to do that, but, until you're actually in that situation. But I just always, I always just kind of go back to this idea of, it's also easy for us to, just, kind of pass this off as, it's not that big of a deal because we're not the ones that went through this. I mean, that's my only, real counter to that is, police make mistakes. They're only human, but we're not the ones that go through this. When you go through that, personally, you're probably going to have a different outlook on these things. And that's my only, real, take in that matter, if that makes sense.
100%. And you're ex-DOD, so you know this. If something goes bad, particularly if something goes bad where you have something goes bad and you have a friendly fire incident, mm-hmm, there's an investigation. Logs are getting pulled out. We're checking the ammunition to see if it was faulty. Yeah. We're grilling COs to be like, hey, where did you fuck up? And where did you fuck up? You'll have fucking MPs come in and just grill people left, right, and center, and they will get to the bottom of it. By the way, I apologize. I forgot to ask. Are profanities on deck for this one? I'm
not concerned about profanities. Just keep it in TOS. That's all I care about. So.
Oh yeah. Okay. That's cool. That's fine.
But
yeah, I didn't get to ask, so
it's okay.
Yeah, I totally get where people are in a particular position where people want to criticize, particularly in the climate that we're in. Everyone wants to find fault in everybody else. And don't get me wrong, there's some assholes out there.
Oh, yeah.
I totally get it where people want to go headhunting. I will say this: if I have any bias when it comes to the police, and I've said this many times before, so I don't think I'm like being out of bounds to say this again.
Yeah.
I consistently find problems between the beat cops and the staters. I love staters. Almost every time I interact with them, they treat me nice, they treat me fairly, and more importantly, they know what the hell they're doing.
Yeah.
But I keep seeing these videos of beat cops, and like, granted, they're going to generally have more interactions on a person-to-person basis, but it's just like, where are you getting these people? What are you training them with? I am mortified by the difference in quality everywhere between largely what we would call state troopers and what we would call beat cops.
Yeah. Fair enough. So, anyway, was there anything else you want to kind of add on this topic, or are you ready to move on to your current event?
Yeah, I can move on. I apologize. I must have had a miscommunication there. I didn't remember, or I didn't get told to bring some stuff, but I know that we can always just talk about, I know we can talk a little about Ukraine, because that's something that you and me are invested within.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just TLDR, a lot of people are probably wondering out there, like, what's going on over there? Like, how's it, like, how do we get here? And, I'll basically summarize this as this. We were hoping that there was going to be a major Ukrainian counteroffensive last year. There actually was. The problem is that it bogged down because the Russians deployed an absolute crap ton of landmines. And once again, the Ukrainians didn't have the correct training and the correct equipment to deal with that. Ukrainians have fought like titans. They absolutely have. The problem consistently ends up being that the Ukrainians are a day late and a dollar short when it comes to the stuff that they need to win the fight. They got F-16s last year. They will be trained up and equipped with them pretty well by the time we come around to campaign season this year. Looks like the weather is not cooperating to where they can launch offensives in the winter again, so that's not helping. But if I was going to TLDR this, it looks like Ukraine is in a situation where this is their last year to win. They're running out of manpower. They are running out of weapons transfers from the West because a lot of people think we've been sending them money. We haven't. We've been sitting on these old weapons that have been sitting on the shelves, that most of which we were never planning on using. The F-16s that we have are literally like the Block 60s that we started building back in the late 90s. They're nothing compared to what we have now. And so you're talking about a day late and a gen short with a lot of these things. And the problem now is that for the West, most of the stuff we wanted to give over, we already have. We're out of that. We're in a situation where we have to give our second line stuff that is like still being rotated out, basically. That is, it still has some service life in it, but it's one of those things that it's slated for retirement, and or it's stuff that we actually would like to have on the back burner just in case, kind of thing.
Sure.
And we are now having to make that conversation, even with the massive defense spending that we've had, is that we've got a lot of good stuff, but details. We've got a lot of good stuff. We have 8,000 Abrams that we have built. We usually continually refurbish them, give the couple, we've got about a good 1,000 or 2 that are sitting in the boneyard that will, work in and out of the fleet. Now we can do that for the Ukrainians. We already have sent over basically a company or two worth of Abrams tanks, but you got to gut them. You got to completely rework half their armor scheme, and you got to rework the fire control, because we're scared if the Russians actually get their hands on a few, they're going to be able to reverse engineer it.
Yeah,
that's a whole conversation to itself. But what I think the United States is actually at the point of, the West already is, a lot of the Europeans are there because they haven't spent nearly as much on defense since the Cold War ended as we have, is everyone's kind of out of their second tier stuff, or more particularly their third tier stuff. And now it's either people are getting the Ukrainians have to get their second tier stuff or their first tier stuff, which is stuff they don't really want to part with, and they have to increase their defense budgets to fund their own rearmament. Now, where I stand on this particular thing, but a lot of people are doing the numbers and doing the math, and we're finding out war is expensive, as it always has been.
Always is.
So I'm afraid to say this, but it looks like this is going to be the last year that Ukrainians can win, because while the Russians have been showing consistently that they have numerous inefficiencies within their system, and Russia is not a peer-to-peer competitor. Without NATO intervention, Ukraine probably will lose over the next 3 years. Mm-hmm. But if something changes that is a little bit more drastic, this becomes a different ball game.
Fair enough. When Ukraine initially kicked off, so the person I usually talk to when it comes to geopolitics is, like, I talk about him all the time, is my friend Mike Hilliard. Him and I were talking about, like, him and I were both convinced that Russia was not going to invade. And the next day I find out Russia invaded, I sent him a message like, hey, dude, what happened, man? He's like, dude, I am gobsmacked. Like, he was blown away by it. And I talked to one of my old, supervisors. He was my first on at one point, and him and I talked about, like, he was convinced that that Russia was going to do the whole, like, you remember at the bombardment of Berlin where they basically used artillery and just leveled the city, essentially. He was convinced that that's what was going to happen. For some reason, Russia hasn't done that. I'm kind of surprised at that, too.
Oh, they definitely have.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay.
I'll get there in a minute. I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish. I'm being rude.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm just talking about to the level that they did, like, with Berlin, essentially. Now, they have done, like, this campaign, but we're talking, like, they surrounded, like, the entire city of Berlin with their artillery pieces and just blasted it to smithereens. Ukraine has done a fairly decent job of defensive, but the thing is the thing I have found out, and this is over 20 years, is that it's usually like the low-tech stuff that can beat the high-tech stuff, and Ukraine realizes this too. Now, granted, we are sending them, the equipment, because a lot of the arsenal that you were talking about is weapons we were supposed to use against Russia should the Cold War actually kick off into a full-blown war. That's what we were supposed to use against them. That's why, like, javelins, Stinger missiles got sent to them, essentially, because that's what they ended up using against Russia, and it's been very, very effective. However, Russia has been doing so. Now, this is the thing I found that was interesting, is that Russia has been purchasing technology from Iran, drone technology, which is insane to think about, because Iran apparently is very, very good about making drones, essentially. Now, Russia has been losing people, has been losing armament, has been losing tanks, has been losing equipment and whatnot, but so is Ukraine. I feel like this has been like a little bit of ground here gained, a little bit of ground lost here for Ukraine, essentially. And I've talked about this pretty significantly. Ukraine, in order for them to declare a total victory, they would have to reclaim Crimea. It's not going to happen. They'd have to reclaim all the territory that Russia essentially has in Ukraine, like the eastern portion, I think it is. Is it the eastern portion, I think? Like,
yes.
Like, they would actually, Ukraine would basically have to reclaim all that, reclaim Crimea. Russia would just basically have to pay sanctions and reparations and whatnot. But that's not going to happen, I don't think. I think that, like, because I think Zelensky, regardless of the fact of the matter is like, if Russia comes to the table and Ukraine comes to the table, if Ukraine doesn't leave with that, it's going to be for nothing, essentially. Now, everything that we've been sending them, the U.S. taxpayer is losing their mind over this, and I get it. I understand. This is not a war we're supposed to be involved in, but I look at it like this. If we did not support if we did not support Ukraine against Russia, we would be looked at as cowards. We would be looked at as, you're not helping. You guys don't practice what you preach. You don't back up people that you said you would back up, kind of deal. But the fact that we are backing up, we're like, why are we getting involved? We're not the world police, essentially. It's very much no matter what we do, we look like the assholes, essentially. Now, I do support the war against Russia. I do support Ukraine. I do wish it was over quickly, but, having served 20 years, I know that wars like this are just expensive. They take a very, very long time to do. Now, in the event that we actually have to stop supporting Ukraine, and in the event that we actually can't support Ukraine anymore, and NATO can't support Ukraine anymore, I think you're right that Ukraine, I wouldn't say that they have to win, but it's just like they're not going to have any support anymore. I just worry that they're going to seek help elsewhere. Who else would they turn to? But who else in that region is going to turn to them, essentially? And that's what I think about. It's like, is anybody going to come to Ukraine's aid after this, especially for a long, drawn-out war? Now, the only reason I worry, because I'm critical of the Russian government, not so much the Russian people. They don't want any part of this, essentially. The only reason why they're supporting this is because they know if they speak out against Putin, they might end up in the gulag somewhere. But my only concern for the Russian people is that wars, like the USSR basically collapsed because of their war in Afghanistan. This could be their next Afghanistan. Could be. I'm not saying it will be the next Afghanistan, but that's just kind of like where I'm coming to. Now, can Ukraine win this war? Yes. Can they lose this war? Yes. It's really hard to determine how it's going to go because it's just, I feel like no one's really kind of, showing any sign of stopping. Everyone's just kind of like stuck, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get you. I've got quite a few notes here that I want to hit on. Mm-hmm. I disagree with the stingers and the javelins part. A lot of the stuff that we sent over to Ukraine has either been stuff that it was largely within the inventory that we were going to either use or have a lot of part of. So 155 howitzer shells, right? Mm-hmm. We use a crap ton of them. We it doesn't hurt to basically have an increased demand on them because we know they're working. They're not super expensive anyway.
Yeah.
Just standard artillery shells. It's just a bump in the defense spending. Then people are talking about stingers and javelins. Hell, we sent stingers all the way to Afghanistan back in the 80s. Well, the reality, at least, that's a far more concerning part, is that a lot of people think that these were the weapons that we were going to fight the next war with. They never were. Mm-hmm. These were the back burner weapons in case all hell break loose, and we just didn't have any other option. Because javelins are not remotely our primary anti-tank weapon. Our primary anti-tank weapon is either the Hellfire missile launched off of an aircraft or some form of aircraft, or an M1 Abrams battle tank that's going to come in and just blow the hell out of everything, right? Like that's what we use to destroy enemy armor.
Sure.
Like the javelin is literally our worst case scenario weapon. We don't even train to use it in most of our units. It's literally deployed to, I think, 4th Infantry Division because they're the only motorized unit in the entire army.
It's not just 4th Infantry, but anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, Russia buying drones. A lot of people are like, oh, well, Iran's drones must be really good. No, it's not that they're good. The Russians just can't build enough. Mm-hmm. We've seen this consistently. There's so much corruption within their society and within their systems that even though they've had these stockpiles since, that they drug out that they built up during the Cold War, a lot of this stuff is faulty. A lot of this stuff doesn't work as well as, as advertised.
Sure.
And because partly the sanctions, but also in the fact that Russia has become a delinquent industrially, they cannot build enough of these basically equipment systems to compete in a modern warfare. And so they are building a number of things. They're building artillery and artillery shells and a lot of these other systems, but they're all what we would call dumb munitions to a large degree. They don't really have any kind of ability to make microprocessors within the Federation itself. And quite honestly, it's now so de-educated and so corrupt that no one wants to bring in that expertise, and anyone who had it largely fled back in the 90s or fled during this last round of drafts. Mm-hmm. So, Russia's going to buy stuff from wherever they can get it, but that's not a sign of strength. That's a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
The Russians actually having to scoop to the Persians, which they don't like, right? And buying artillery and drones is not something that Moscow wants to do or likes to do. Mm-hmm. So I think people misread that a lot. When it comes to supporting Ukraine, a lot of people are like, oh, we're if we don't help out, we're going to be cowards. And the problem is cowardice got us here in the first place. For so long, we have said this is going to be a red line. We're not going to let you do this. We're not going to let you do that. And whether it be the Russians or Syria or China, half the time when the United States draws the line in the sand, we don't do anything about it. And after generations of very poor leadership from the White House, and this is both Democrats and Republicans, our enemies now believe that we are not willing to put up a fight. And as much as I cringe to say this for a lot of people out there because this is a scary thought, the fact that we aren't willing to risk a nuclear war to tell the Russians to go pound sand is exactly the problem. If you want peace in Eastern Europe, particularly in the fact that Russia is in the state that it is in, it's not that you have to scoop and give them a settlement. You have to tell the Russians point blank, we will throw nukes at you over Ukraine. We aren't going to put up with this crap anymore. And the fact that we've gotten to this point where it's been 2 years since the war has already started, the fact that we have gotten to the point where we've slowed weapons transfers, the fact that we've gotten to the point where an entire political party is now pretty well, no, I'm not going to say that. That would be disingenuous. a wing of the Republican Party that actually is the more controlling interest within the party is openly saying that supporting Ukraine is anti-patriotic, when I think it's one of the most patriotic things we can do, and that's my own bias. It's deeply concerning, and the Russians like that. They don't believe that we're willing to fight. They don't believe that we are willing to actually put blood in the paint and say, hey, look, liberty and democracy and freedom are things that we're willing to fight and die for. They don't believe that we're going to do it. And so this isn't the last war. A lot of people think I'm crazy when I say this, but I don't think Ukraine will be the last place that they invade this century. And the only way you stop that is by telling them very plain up, if you want to blink, go for it, because you will be turned into radioactive ash if you do.
So my only question for this is if we were to say, hey, listen, Russia, if you do this, we're just going to nuke you. Do you think they could call our bluff and say, well, okay, you want to go mutually assured destruction, because if you launch nukes at us, guess what we're going to do? We're going to launch nukes at you and all your allies, and you're going to be the one to answer for that.
There's two ways to play this, because it is political brinksmanship, and I'm not going to act like it's not.
Sure.
The smart thing to do is not to actually say we're going to nuke you. The actual smart thing to do is to act like nuclear weapons never exist. Mm-hmm. And what you don't mention it, you don't talk about it. But what you do is you put you put I cannot talk. You move 3rd Armored Corps to Ukraine, and you literally sit there with, what is that, 75,000 troops armed to the teeth with what, 2 armored divisions and a mechanized division, and tell them, hey, look, if you want to go, we're here and we're ready. That's deterrence. But we didn't do that, because there's a big conversation in Washington. Will the Russians throw nukes over Ukraine? I don't think they will, but that's a big leap for a lot of people.
I think the only reason why they would do that is if we tried to go into Russia, or if anybody tries to go into Russia, and then Putin's gonna be like, okay, you guys gotta come into Russia, just go for broke, let's start launching them. That's the only reason I think that, Putin he'd go for broke in that scenario. And I don't want anybody to start thinking, okay, it's time to, chase them back to their lair. No. Okay. Most times you might want to, but what happens when you chase Russia back to their country? Napoleon found out. Hitler found out. They're not going to run away in the middle of summertime. They're going to run away when it's most vulnerable, which is in the wintertime. It's just, there's a lot.
The general accepted rule is that no one's probably going to throw a nuke unless the dissolution of their government is at hand. Mm-hmm. The United States has openly said that we are a level and order above that. Mm-hmm. We've openly said, and whether you believe the U.S. government or not, we will throw a nuke at anyone who we think is going to use one. We literally we've openly stated our doctrine is preemptive strike. If we have good information and assets saying that you're going to launch, we will launch before you do.
Yeah.
A little bit of a scary thought for me, but it does have a rationality to it.
Yeah.
The Russians have been very loose about their nuclear weapons policy. They've openly told the Chinese if there's one Chinese soldier that steps foot into Siberia, they're completely glassing China. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the West, it's been a different conversation, because I think the Russians know a little bit more than what the average civilian does. There's a pretty good chance we are able to interdict most of their weapons.
Gotcha.
And yeah, a lot of people don't really know how to handle that particular conversation, which is probably one of the reasons why how do I put this? The treaty that we had with them, one of the START treaties, particularly the intermediate range missiles, they've withdrawn from, because those are the weapons that you want to use if you want to sneak weapon, or if you want to basically get your weapons through. We can pretty well intercept most ICBMs now. It's just the degree of how many. Mm-hmm. It's largely those tactical cruise missiles that are flying, 100 feet over the deck, that are the ones that are hard to intercept, because they're, they've got a low radar cross section. You don't see them unless you have literally an AWACS looking for them. It's one of those deals where that gets hairy. And if the Russians are going to arm in that general direction, good for them as far as being intelligent in the brinksmanship, but also horrible for them on the brinksmanship, because it goes the other way around. The United States, that now has been cut off the reins of using TLAMs, these are Tomahawk land attack missiles, we've held ourselves back for years, and now the United States Marine Corps has been equipping themselves with TLAMs and TASMs. Those are the anti-ship missiles. And they're just putting them up on a little island installations here, there, and everywhere to not only oppose the Russians, but to oppose the Chinese as well. They actually did us a favor in that regard.
I see, like, that's like stuff that even I don't even really know too much about, honestly. So it's interesting to learn about. So, before we kind of move on to the next subject, I'm just kind of curious. Why do you think Russia invaded Ukraine? What do you think that they were hoping to gain? What do you think their end game was, essentially? I know that's a lot of questions, but...
No, actually, I think it's a lot simpler than a lot of people realize. A lot of people will think that Putin's world conqueror. No, I don't think that's the case. What I think is that the Russians are looking at themselves in their own stock, if you will, and they're not too confident on what their future is. So let me outline a few things just to get what I think is the Russian mind space, and then I'll answer the general question. Russia's economy and civil institutions collapsed during when the Soviet Union went. And they've tried to build back some of these to a large degree, but let's be real here. Most of that has been done through foreign expertise. They hire other peoples from other lands to do the work for them, or at least to try to teach them. And at least from what we've seen, it doesn't look like the teaching thing has worked very well because they didn't put enough money behind it. So they just paid people lucrative salaries to work for Gazprom or any of these other companies. And they finally got to being a major oil exporter just in time for them to throw another war. Doesn't look too well. We've actually seen chemical fires and explosions happening in their refinery system that you can see from space. So it largely looks like the majority of the Russian people are not educated enough to run any of their technical stuff. You're talking about a country that domestically can produce probably 1930s technology again. That's largely the best that it looks like they can get away with. Now, granted, that in volume and quantity can still hurt a lot, but it's very concerning as far as where the Russians are on that civil economic front. Second part is security as a concern at large. We're talking about a demography that tanked, right? They just don't have a lot of young people. The last big chunk of population within Russia are my age or older, and I'm 32. I literally the Soviet Union takes a dump 2 months after I'm born, and because of that, there's no one younger than me to defend the Russia. Or at least we're talking about a 60% drop in their birth rate, and it's probably more like 70 because their statistics have been a little wild. Well, what happens when you don't have any young people to defend your borders against? Let's be real here. I know I hate to take up this talking point, but I think it's real. The Russians are scared shitless of us. They don't think NATO is simply defensive because of what we did in Libya, right? NATO had a problem with Muammar Gaddafi. We got together and we just ganked him. We've done a number of things when it came to the Serbia-Kosovo war, which, don't get me wrong, I totally will defend us intervening in Kosovo. But NATO is not seen as a strictly defensive platform. It's just not. And so the Russians are scared shitless of that. So what they're looking for is my overall answer is they're looking for strategic depth. They are in a vulnerable spot. They realize that the only way that they can really possibly... Let's just assume that NATO isn't even the real threat. Let's just assume that the EU collapses in 10 years and all this. What does an armed and militant Germany do to a weakened Russia? Because the first time they fought, the Russians lost their main government and were forced into the most humiliating defeat they've ever had in literally their history. The second time, the Russians won, but it cost them 15% of their population. And it was actually 1/4 of every Ukrainian, Belarusian, and European Russian that died in that conflict. That's not something they want to see again. So what they're trying to do, and Ukraine is not the end point for this, it is the halfway point. They're trying to get to the Polish Gap, which is basically everything north of, I can't remember these mountains. I'm blanking on it, but there's a number of mountains that are in the southern Polish Czech border. And if you hunker in between there and the Baltic Sea, you've got about 110 odd miles that you got to hunker down into. But if you can concentrate your forces there, you can keep the Germans from invading you. You can also go down to what we call Bessarabia, which is the area of Romania where those same mountains, and I can't remember. Carpathians, excuse me. Carpathian Mountains is what we're talking about. The Southern Carpathian Mountains and the Black Sea, there's only about 60 miles there. And you can hunker in there, and that keeps your other major enemy that has invaded you time and time again, the Turks, from being able to get through you on that direction as well. Everywhere else, they've largely got hunkered down, but their biggest enemies that they've had are all, in points where they can literally just propagate force into Russia, and there's hardly anything to stop them. So I think they're looking at this not from a sense of strength, but a sense of severe weakness. And if you think about what NATO is literally the best hits club of people who have kicked the Russians' ass. And when the Swedes actually finally get to join in and the Turks stop blocking them, it will literally be the European trifecta. They will have everybody who's fought a major war with the Russians in the last 500 years will be a NATO member. Now tell me, are you not going to be a little nervous if that's what you're going up against? Or even theoretically could go up against?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's just like, they're probably a little nervous that, Finland and Sweden joined up because, like, Finland and Sweden said, well, we're going to join in, like, after this, like, hey, well, let's talk about joining up with NATO here. Because, like, they were, like, very much against joining NATO, which I think is, like, I think it's just, I feel like they've pushed people more towards NATO, but like Ukraine is like a different story in this aspect. I mean, if that's the way I look at it, at least. So
I absolutely agree with you that they have actually, if you will, the political brinksmanship has failed, because I actually think they were going to have a 3-day war. That was the whole plan. They were going to walk into Ukraine. Ukraine was going to fold. I think that literally was the battle plan. And if you look at how the invasion was conducted, it wasn't what they did in Grozny. You referenced Berlin, but I would reference Grozny back in what we saw in the 90s and 2000s, where they just roll in a bunch of artillery and level everything. That was their default plan whenever they figured out their original plan A didn't work, and that's why they leveled Mariupol to the ground. In exactly that manner. They just rolled in enough artillery and they leveled everything block by block by block. Yeah. What their original plan was, they used 80% of their smart munitions from the looks of it. And they were going to basically use it was going to be a 3-day blitzkrieg, but moreover a 2-week overall campaign where they were going to roll through the entire country. Well, it looks like they had practiced the battle plan. It looks like they had practiced a number of these things. But what really just it came down to was twofold. One, the Ukrainians absolutely marshaled in levels that no one expected. Fair enough. The other part was that the Russians were not nearly as capable of fighting a war as they thought they were. Great example was the convoy that started literally the day of, where you had a 40-mile long convoy, and in literally the first day they run out of fuel, and in 3 days they run out of food. So, if you're not running your logistics, you probably don't know how to fight a war. And to be fair,
logistics is everything in war. Like, that's why, like, transportation units were the most targeted units in Iraq, because they would travel from Kuwait. I didn't mean to cut you off. When they traveled from Kuwait into Baghdad or other parts of Iraq, they were the most targeted units, because even the enemy knows you take out the logistics, you could basically throw off an entire unit. I mean, just like being a truck driver. If you throw off, like, if truck drivers stopped working for 3 days, you could throw our entire country into complete disarray. Like, it would, like, grocery stores would have to throw out food and things like that. I mean, logistics, people do not understand how important logistics are.
The large part about logistics, and the United States military, like, our number one target, no, I'm sorry, it's actually our number 2 target, is the enemy's logistical capability. Our number 1 target is their command and control. But when it comes down to it, we know, everyone largely knows if you've studied war, particularly modern war, that logistics are the targets of outsized potential. Because you can put all this effort into killing a main battle tank, right? It's a 70-ton monster, costs something on the order of like $7 million a pop, right?
Sure.
But that truck that carries its fuel is a 2-for-1.
Yes.
It's vulnerable. It's not armored. The guy driving the truck might not even have a firearm to defend himself. And you literally pop the trailer. Let's assume it's, ammunition or, petrol, lubricants, oil, that kind of stuff. It lights up. You literally, with the cost of a couple of rounds and sending a platoon of guys to go like take out some stuff, have shut down an entire armored company.
Absolutely.
Who cares if you've destroyed the tank if it doesn't have any fuel or the guys don't have any food? And like that's just the conversation, and if you will, the economics of war, is that it's absolutely amazing to take out the logistics train. The only problem with doing so is that do you have enough firepower and intelligence to do it? Because if you're going up against the United States logistics train, you can make our nose bleed by hitting those targets. But do you have the ability? And more importantly, do you have enough firepower? Because the United States knows. And we've doubled the size of our transportation fleet just in case something bad happens.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's... like this is like a topic we could go on like for like hours on end about though. But
yeah. If you want to do your second topic,
no, it's fine. But like it's a good topic though. Like don't get me wrong. Like it's like these are the things that people don't talk about. Like when it comes to when it comes down to war, like in Ukraine, people are very short sighted. They don't think about like the long game. Like what are we going to focus on? Like how do you win the war kind of deal. But yeah, we'll go ahead and move on to the second current event for myself. So the second current event I have right now. The Iowa caucus finished on the 15th of January. I think it was a little odd how they tallied the votes, because like people on the right really want, voter ID. They want accountability with it. And I know this is not like a real, the day of election kind of deal. But did you see like what they were doing with the votes? They were walking around.
Caucus.
Yeah, the caucus. But they were walking around with paper bags and people were putting in the names. I'm like, what? I'm like, they call this a good system. I have a bit of a problem with that because you got HEB bags walking around. I know it's not HEB, but like you're walking around with paper bags. That's not very secure in my honest opinion.
I'm gonna just be real here. The right bitching about elections, unfortunately, and I'm a righty for anyone who's listening in, or at least I consider myself moderately right. 90% of it is just people bitching up a storm because they're not getting their way.
Yeah,
and I wish that was not the case, but I think the writing's on the wall and everyone sees it. If you're looking at what Republicans do in Georgia, they make it harder for people who don't like them to vote. And they will bitch about election security when they're not bitching about this in Indiana whatsoever. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah,
perfectly fine.
Yeah.
It's not being biased. It's being blatantly hypocritical. And it at least for me, as somebody showing off what it is, like most people don't give a flying crap about the security of our elections because most people actually believe in it. Otherwise, you wouldn't show up to vote in the first damn place.
Very true. Yep. Anyway,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say so the final results was Trump won with 51% of the vote of 56,260 people. DeSantis with 21%, 23,420. Haley won with 19. Came in third place with 19%, 21,085. Ramaswamy with 8% at 8,449. Chris Christie with a whopping 0% at 35 people, and Asa Hutchinson had 0% at 191, essentially. So, Vivek Ramaswamy actually conceded and dropped out of it. And here's the amazing thing: like on January 15th,
give me just a second. I just lost my voice. I just lost you in voice. I don't know why.
Oh, can you not hear me? It's okay, we're just having difficulty, folks. It's all right. It happens. I'll just edit it later. How about now? Can you hear me now? Okay, now I lost you.
You lost me, huh?
Okay, now you're good. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. I think I kicked my cord.
It happens.
Is what happened. So. Yeah, I apologize for that deeply.
Yep. I'll just edit it later.
Yeah, I'm actually working on redoing my setup so that that doesn't happen. But I need about $1,000 for that. I'm working on doing that probably whenever we get the tax check. But we're gonna see.
Yep.
Anywho.
Yep. So Vivek Ramaswamy responded to a tweet that Trump did on True Social, which I read this on X Core, and I was like, I just shook my head at Vivek. So Donald Trump said, "A vote for Vivek is a wasted vote. I like Vivek, but he played it too cute with U.S. Caucus tonight. Vote for Donald J. Trump, build up the numbers. In November, we must take our very troubled nation, a nation in decline, back from crooked Joe Biden and the radical left Democrats and thugs who are destroying MAGA." This is how Vivek responded. I've defended Trump at every step and respect him immensely. You won't hear me attacking him. I'm asking for your vote tonight because I believe it's the right thing for our country. We cannot walk into the other side's trap and watch puppet masters quickly trot Nikki into power. Now people want Vivek to be in Trump's campaign as his running mate, essentially. I'm seeing people pick Vivek to be your VP, pick him to be your running mate. Honestly, I don't know if Vivek is trying to win his way in, because I found it really peculiar, like how Vivek was like, he's the greatest president of the last century, but yet he's running against him. And Chris Christie was actually very, it was good that he blasted him. It's like, well, why are you running in the election if you like him so much? But I consider Vivek Ramaswamy kind of a spineless coward, kind of like Ted Cruz. When Ted Cruz, when Donald Trump insulted Ted Cruz's wife, Ted Cruz says, I will never let anybody insult my wife. And then he kind of buckled over just like Vivek did, which I find very spineless. I mean, politics is a very bloody campaign, and I'm a firm believer that, if you can't take it, don't dish it out. And Ted Cruz couldn't take it, and he just couldn't dish it out either. But here's my question to you, though, essentially. How do you feel about Vivek dropping out and supporting Donald Trump? And finally, do you think Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis have a chance? Because I personally think they don't have a chance in hell, because Donald Trump is far too popular with the MAGA or the Republican Party. Everybody on the right thinks that Donald Trump is the only person, and I'm not saying that. Now, let's get one thing straight. I don't think everybody on the right is a MAGA loyalist. I don't think everybody loves Donald Trump. I don't think everybody swears up and down. I think when people vote in 2024, it's not so much a vote for Donald Trump. It's just because they don't like Joe Biden, which is fair. People can not like Joe Biden. That is entirely your right to do so. I'm okay with that. You and I might have a conversation about it, though. But, I just think that some people are voting for Donald Trump because they're Republican, or they don't like Joe Biden, or maybe they do believe that Donald Trump is the answer. And some people are just blind loyalists that just love and worship the ground that he walks on, which I'm just like, why would you do this to yourself? But I don't think Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis have a chance. Ron DeSantis is not nearly as popular, not nearly as charismatic as, and I'll say this, he's very charismatic. He's still holding thousands of people at his rallies. Nikki Haley does not have a chance in hell, because the second she spoke out against Trump, the second you speak out against him, you're gonna lose the endorsement. He's gonna say this person's a bad, overrated person, and you're gonna basically lose all the credibility with everybody that's on the right. But anyway, what do you think in this regard?
I think the exact opposite is true. I think if Nikki Haley is going to survive and actually do remotely even well when it comes to the convention, she needs to go hard in the paint. She needs to actually be the anti-Trump embodiment. She needs to tell the Republicans Trump is insane. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He's a disgrace to the party. Basically a full-on declaration of war. Because if she... this is the thing I don't understand about these moderates. And being one of them. I understand that people are concerned about their political careers. I understand that people are concerned about, treading that fine line. But the biggest problem with the voters versus these, more elites or whatever you want to call them, the establishment folks, is that the establishment doesn't fight for the voters. That's why they revolted. That's why they're putting up a bunch of degenerates that are hell-bent on basically being the bull in the china shop, is that the voter feels like there's not been anyone who's actually worked for them. And the problem is Nikki Haley is kind of the embodiment of that, and that's why Vivek and a number of others are just like, oh, she's the establishment neocon. But the neocons need to actually show they got some grit, because if Trump wins, they don't have a job. This is an all-or-nothing fight for them, and they're not treating it as it is, as it's such. And I'm seriously concerned about how well the neocons are going to do remotely at all, because if they were smart, Haley should have had at least second place with 40% of the vote in this primary. And the fact that they're not rallying, the fact that they're not going into the paint, means that they are seeing the end of their party as they know it. And if they want to give it up, fine, give it up. But they can't be a Republican anymore. They can't. MAGA is pushing them out consistently. And if Donald Trump, forget Donald Trump being the president, if he is the nominee again, is that he's going to have enough political clout within the party to continue primarying against people that are more moderate, more sensible, more all these things. And I apologize, my bias is really showing on this one, but I agree with Trump on about 70% of policy, but his behavior was atrocious. And while I voted for him in 2020, I could do so because of two reasons. One, he hadn't gone completely batshit as far as his behavior in general. He was just a guy who did mean tweets, right? It was moreover his behavior afterward, in combination with the fact that it pleasantly surprised me as his capability of being president. Shocker, Biden's actually okay as a president. Oh, how dare you? You're not a real Republican. Well, bite me. What it comes down to is this. Trump went to a whole nother level after he lost the election. Basically was saying it was fraudulent the first day. And, maybe if I had seen a couple of lawyers and more particularly a couple of judges pick up the cases and say, all right, cool. We're going to explore this. We're going to open up the cases. We're going to, have a full trial on it. All of them consistently thrown out again and again and again. None of this was real. It was just, it was Trump being a sore loser. And when we go further into this, DeSantis is one of the only people who wins in 2022. He grains when other people consistently are losing throughout the party. And instead of Trump and the Republicans praising DeSantis, Trump goes into him that night, calling him Ron DeSanctimonious. Oh, he was just on my coattails. It's all about him. He's not here for you. He's not here for us. He's not here to make America better. It's all about him. And you can't be a good commander-in-chief when you're like that. I'm consistently seeing behaviors where he's not going to do what he needs to do to be a great president. He could have. He had a perfectly good opportunity in his first presidential, term, in the regards that he could have gone He could have gone trust busting. That would have made him one of the most popular presidents in American history alone, even if it was politically jaded. He could have done a number of these things that really would have put him over the top, but he doesn't, because at the end of the day, he's an autocrat. He only cares about himself. He only cares about the power that he wields. And this whole conversation that the Democrats are bringing up, where it's like, hey, our democracy is a threat. When you question the elections, when you openly are, embracing your followers saying, hey, we want to make you dictator. You're not fit for the republic. And I'll just put it this way, that whole enemies foreign and domestic, you're getting into domestic enemy territory. I'm glad that the Democrats are actually trying to put up enough of a spine to put him in jail. About time. I've pretty much decided that if Trump is the nominee for Republicans, I'm probably just going to say I'm not a Republican anymore. I'll just go independent. So I'll tell people, it's like, look, I lean right, but like this shit is unacceptable. Like I voted for Democrats in the 22 election when it came to federal, because you can't overturn Roe and expect good things to happen. I don't like abortion, but I don't know where the Republicans are right now, but it's not sensible. It's not thought out. It's just zealous. It's zealotry and hatred. And I get it. Like, there's a lot of shit the left does that I do not like in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. So,
but yeah.
What are your thoughts about, so I pretty much went on social media and talked about how Trump says that he'll be a dictator and he says only for one day, right? And just to, close the border and deport people and drill, baby drill kind of deal. And a lot of people say, oh, he's just kidding. He's just kidding. He's just kidding. I remember when he said, I don't kid. And I tend to take things like that at his word. But I ask people, it's like, are you telling me that, and there are people out there, it's like, you know what? Sometimes we need a dictator. It's like, I'm a firm believer that if you give a dictator an inch, he'll take everything from you. Because it's just it's kind of like that, we talked about that red line in the sand. The more that you accept somebody to take, or the more that's like, hey, I'll just, it's only for one day. Okay, so it's not one day, it's 1 week. Okay, it's not 1 week, it's 1 month. I feel like that's all it's going to be. People are just going to continue to make excuses. People might say, you've got Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah, I kind of do, but there's a reason as to why. It's because in my lifetime, I've never seen somebody, so divisive in my entire life. I'm like, what? Now, and I'll put it like this. I'm not saying that Joe Biden is the answer to our problems, because he's not. I don't think any one president is the answer to our problems. That's just, that's nonsensical. I believe that, like, the president is supposed to be like the person to represent the American people. It's Congress and the Senate that puts the laws that, the president will then just sign into place. The job that they're supposed to do is to govern the American people. They serve us. And I just
no, they don't.
Well, they're supposed to.
No, they don't.
They're supposed
No,
to.
they're not. Like, I'm so tired of this shit.
Yeah.
Like, people keep acting like our political representatives are supposed to be public servants. It's a nice idea. It's absolutely stupid. What they are is political power brokers. Okay? They have a job. Their job is to actually not carry out the will of the American people. If they did, we would see a lot of different policies and prescriptions, and most of them would actually be terrible. Their job is to dispense their political capital in a way that serves the people who buy into the system. And that's the kicker here. This is why it was set up the way it is. We have unlimited voting rights now. We've had this since basically after the days of World War One. Women can vote. Anyone who literally isn't a citizen who hasn't been convicted of a felony can vote. So how do you curb that to where we all aren't voting for ourselves to kill the rich and make it to where we all have, 8-week vacations every year? You make it to where you respond to the people who are buying into the system. And that's what they do. And it works. The problem is the majority of people who bought into the system back in the day, right, aren't there anymore. There's no more unions in the degree that there used to be. There's no more League of Women voters to the degree that there used to be. Like, church attendance is so far down, it's ridiculous. So the guy who's preaching to the choir doesn't have a bunch of young people telling them, it's like, look, I get what you're saying, but we don't approve of what you're doing. Like, you need to update your codex here a little bit. Our social institutions have completely broken down. And because of that, you do not feel represented. And I'll tell you exactly why. If you went to your grandparents, if they are still alive, and most of them probably aren't, right? If you had gone to them and said, hey, who's the guy who's advocating for you to get what you want? They would have somebody that they know or that they could talk to, where they could go like, oh yeah, this is my union rep. He talks to our mayor like literally once a week. They have a lunch. Yeah. This is our, like literally. The problem is, you need to have people between you and your elected representatives that if you don't have the elected representative's ear personally, somebody is in their ear for you. And if you don't know that person's name, you don't have one. Dead straight. And we, the average person, haven't had that for over 30 years. And people wonder why the system doesn't work for us anymore. Yeah. It's shocking to me. And this idea that they're just supposed to go out of their way and act good for the American people when the American people heinously treat them like shit over and over and over again. You make one mistake, you're a horrible, evil son of a bitch, we're going to vote you out of office. You can't have any nuance, can't have any like actual conversation with the American people. No, we're going to accept the 30-second soundbite from the media because that's all the detail I need to know. Like, there is a reason why politics in this country doesn't work anymore, and it's the American people. I'm not even going to act like it's anything else because people are like, oh no, it's the politicians, it's the media. No, it's you, the listener, because you have demanded everything at the cost of nothing. And then you wonder why no one wants to work for you. Simple as that. You can accept that as the reality or you don't. But until you say, I'm going to put my money and my time and my energy behind supporting somebody so that they're going to listen to me and do what I want them to do, you're not even in the game. So, yeah, rant over, but, I'm tired.
That's fair. No, it's fair. I mean, that's why I brought John, because, I know you're going to, give me your point of view. I mean, that's why I brought John. I mean, I'm not going to tell.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
No, I know people look at me as somewhat condescending, but, I'm a bit of an elitist, and, I know how the system works. I studied in political science. I know why it does the things it does. And it does pain me, and I will say that there is some problems with, education to where we haven't explained to people why certain things are the way they are. It's one thing to know the three branches of government, and it's painful to see how many people don't know what they are and what they do. But what's worse is why do we have the three branches of government? And people are like, oh, it's checks and balances. Deeper than that. Why is it that the president is the commander-in-chief and head diplomat, but the Congress gets to write the bills. Why is it the Congress is the ones that are actually signing the checks, not the president? You'd think the president signs the checks. Nope, it's the speaker. Why is that? Most people don't know. And the reason why, beyond separation of powers, is that you want people, particularly in the House. The House is actually the big thing when it comes to signing the checks, is you want people who are there who are saying, hey, I got bills to pay today. I'm cool and understand where you want to build this nuclear reactor that's going to cost a crap ton of money to give me power for the next 100 years. But I've still got to put food on the table today.
Yeah.
So the Senate's there to say, long-term, we need to have long-term planning and projects. That is my personal beef on the internet or on the Energy Commission to get. But then the House is there for that short-term stuff, saying it's like, hey, Social Security ain't enough anymore. Like that needs a 20% bump, or a 10% bump. There's a reason why all these things happen or exist. And so, recapping this to the original topic, Trump isn't the guy. He doesn't know. He doesn't listen to a damn person that tells him he's wrong. Mm-hmm. And as much as Haley is annoying to me, she's easily the most qualified candidate on that stage by a country mile. But if she's not willing to fight, if she's not willing to show that she has grit, she's done.
Yeah.
And Trump will be the nominee. In which case we get a repeat of 2020.
Yeah. In which a lot of people feel like that was like one of the worst election cycles that they've ever had to go through. I still say 2016 was really bad too, but that's just my personal opinion. But I think we've kind of like killed this topic. Did you have anything else you want to talk about? Like any current event you want to bring up to, or do you just want to talk about anything else in general?
Crap. I had something earlier, but I didn't write it down.
That's all right.
I am kind of mortified at the state of our politics, but crap, there was somebody I really wanted to get into. Mm-hmm. I don't know, man. I didn't write it down.
That's fine.
We did your two topics. I'm cool with that. We're just over an hour.
Yeah.
If you got something else, we can definitely go into that.
I mean, I really can't think of too much else. I mean, I think like we can kind of go like into this sad state of affairs like with our politics. Like, I was a staunch independent for years, and I remember when I've popped on your shows like, why do I lean left? It's because like I feel like a lot of the issues that are being addressed right now, the Democratic Party is actually addressing those issues. Like infrastructure is one of my biggest talking points. That's one of my because as a truck driver, I've seen the crumbling infrastructure, and I've seen like how important it is to take care of these things. Now, am I saying that the Democrats have all the answers? No, but I'm saying that when that bipartisan infrastructure deal passed, there was a lot of funding that went to all these states, and a lot of these Congress people and all these senators that voted against it were bragging about how this is great that we're getting it. And this just goes to show how important infrastructure is. And I really think that we have failed this country because without good infrastructure, your entire society is going to fall apart. And as somebody that lived in Germany, I can tell you, we have needed high-speed rail for years. Now, people's like, well, why would I need high-speed rail? Have you ever been on a high-speed train? It is freaking amazing. Like, you won't, you'll get at a train station. You'll be at a destination in 45 minutes to an hour that would take you 2 hours by car, and you got to pay for gas. That ticket is like $20 or something like that. I mean, if you take the ICE train in Germany, you'll be in Frankfurt in like less than an hour or something like that, depending where you're at. I mean, it's just, I get why people don't want to use it, but the thing is it's like, having worked in intermodal, 30% of our freight gets shipped by train. If those trains collapse, or if the train system is not maintained, essentially, that's 30% that has to get shifted to truck drivers. And truck drivers is one of the most, it has the highest turnover rate of most other jobs. There's like a 100 to 200% turnover rate in the truck driving industry, essentially. So this is why, you've got to maintain this stuff. But the problem is, though, working on the rail line is really hard work. You'll be gone for days, weeks at a time, and you get paid dick at times too. And why would you want to work there if you're not going to get paid, if you're not, healthcare is not going to be there, if you're, sick pay is not going to be there, sick leave is not going to be there. I mean, a lot of it comes into it. I mean, it's really complicated.
You opened up the infrastructure box, which is one of my big three.
Yeah.
Like for me, it's my big three largely is NatSec, energy, and infrastructure. Because if you want a thriving economy, those are usually the things you need to focus on most and foremost. U.S. infrastructure is wild because in some ways we're better than everybody else, and in some ways we're like the worst. Our freight rail is absolutely like top tier, but it could be significantly better. A great example of this, if anyone doesn't realize if they don't travel, a lot of rail works exactly like the old U.S. highway system, where you have highways that go from city to city, but when it goes in the city, it doesn't bypass it. It literally goes right through the middle of downtown. And most railroads are still on that kind of system. Most railroads still go through downtown Vincennes, where I am. I'm only in a town of 18,000 people. But as an example of this, though, every time they have to get on the road, they have to slow down. Whereas most cities of any kind of size now have a 2-lane divided highway bypass that goes around it. And because of that, you don't have to go slower than 55 miles an hour on almost any major city in any major metropolitan area. But those trains have to go through every little town at 35 miles an hour. And when you do that, you're significantly slower. What can take a truck to cross the country on I-40 takes about 4 days, maybe 5, right? If you're doing it on the railroad, 2 weeks at best. And granted, there's some conversations about like company switching and whatnot, but the reality is that at minimum, our rail system needs an upgrade just to allow freight trains to go from major epicenter to major epicenter, and get on the rails and go 70 miles an hour and just book it. And they can't. Now we can build that. Half of the stuff we could do with pretty cheap. We're going to have to use some pretty aggressive eminent domain, and I totally get where people are a little antsy about that.
Yeah, of course.
But if we did so, and if we, actually put the money behind paying people what it's worth, you would have a significant drop in just your transportation costs. Because the actual numbers I've seen is about 40% of our goods and services are put on rail. But it literally should be 80, if not more. And basically any point between collecting, or I can't remember the actual word for it, but when you collect all the goods and services around and you put it on a train, that's the job for the trucks. And then dispensing that from the train should be for the trucks. But this shit where you've got drivers crossing the entire country to deliver payloads, no. Like that, I can already tell you that's where we're going wrong. Trains should be able to do that cheaply, quickly, and efficiently. They can do it cheaply, but they can't do it quickly. And the efficiency is kind of a conversation in itself because it takes an exorbitant amount of time.
Yep. Well, having driven OTR, I've driven I-40, and it took my co-driver and I about 2.5, almost 3 days to get from California to South Carolina on I-40. We just took I-40 the whole way across, and that was the most money I'd made. So I do think that it's possible, and that's where OTR, that's where the expedited freight comes into play. Now, not every business can operate like this, but I agree with you because freight is essential because
most places don't run the reason why I was saying 5 days. Most places don't run the dual drivers.
Exactly. And some of them don't pay their drivers enough. Covenant pays great. I mean, if you want to go into truck driving, if you don't mind riding with somebody else, Covenant's a great starter company. I'll tell anybody that. But anyway, with trains though, the issue as far as the trains is just like a 2 or 3 mile long train will usually have stacked containers, 2 containers stacked per train, basically per cart essentially. And when I work with JB Hunt, what's it called? The BNSF, Burlington Northern Santa Fe trains. JB Hunt has the most containers that you'll see on those trains. I know because I would go into those yards and get those containers off, or they would load the containers onto me and whatnot, or they would put them on a chassis. I'm digressing though, but it's good that you would ship from California all the way to Chicago, and then I would deliver that to the Walmart distribution center in Brownstown, Michigan and whatnot. That is an efficient way for it to travel, because especially for refrigerator units, because that's why it's so important for you to fuel the refrigerator, because it's going to take a few days for it to get there. I mean, those tanks last forever. But you're 100% right. I think that more emphasis needs to come into the freight. But I also think if you could actually make high-speed rail more efficient, you're going to cut down on airline costs as well because, less people might be inclined to fly. I don't like flying anymore because of the hassle of it is. I don't like flying anymore. I prefer to drive, but, taking trains, it's dangerous.
HSR.
Yep.
I want to get into HSR here in a second. Like, I'm just talking about American freight rail.
Yeah.
Like, as good as we do it, and we do it better than anybody else, we can literally double our efficiency if we are willing to put some money behind it. And what he's kind of talking about is a great example of this. One of the biggest things that we need to invest in is what we call like these intermodal changing stations, to where you can basically take a container off the back of a car or of a rail car and put it on a truck, and you're done within about 30 seconds, 45 seconds is all it takes.
Depends.
Yeah. Like, it depends on how much you want to fasten it down, but there's two major yards that are just south of Joliet, Illinois. This is a suburb of Chicago that are literally these kind of facilities. And while they have them here and there across the country, we need to quadruple these. They take a lot of room, but what's important here, one, we make it to where it's more applicable to do it just anywhere in general, but we also need to do basically what I call intermodal 2, which is we need to figure out how we can put grain cars that you can put on from a truck onto the train and vice versa in 30 seconds instead of having to wait 5 minutes for the truck to unload. So... yeah. If you're working for ADM, that kind of thing down, it throughout most of the elevators, like our ability to transport goods, while we may lose, let's say 5% of the efficiency because you have to, optimize the trailer to put the combine to get the grain on it and then transport it to the rail yard.
Yep.
If you are able to do this to where the rail yard can just collect literally a bunch of stuff, throw it on the back of a train and just figure out, okay, it's going here in the same way that the airports do postal.
Yeah.
You will radically increase the efficiency of trains, but it requires a build out. And until we do that, it's only going to be as efficient as we allow it to be.
Yeah, and it's I can actually explain the process really easily too. Like, say for example,
sure.
Let's say I go pick up, if I went into the BNSF yard off of Kedzie Road in downtown Chicago, right? I go into the yard, that's Corwith. I go into the Corwith yard, and I got to go pick up this container. It's in this lot, so I'll hook up to the container, and I check to make sure that all the lights work on it. I find out, hey, there's something wrong with this chassis right here that the container is sitting upon. I got to get a chassis flip. That's where that comes into play. I'll go to the chassis flip. What I'll do then is I'll go get a new chassis. I'll check to make sure the lights and everything else works on it. And then I'll go get a form. I'll drive to the yard. The yard jockey's going to come out, or whatever, the switchers they call them. They're going to find out where that container is. They'll bring it over. Now I got to make sure that everything is unlocked in the back, that the pins are unlocked in the back, so that way they can just use the crane to lift them off. And as long as there's not a line there, you could pull in there. They'll be gone for about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on like where the location's at. And then you'll just pull in, they lift it off, and then you just drop it down. You're in and out in like 5 minutes, maybe. But that just depends on how long it takes and how big of a line it is. Now, this is something that happens in intermodal yards. Now, that's the reason why that is efficient, because in other containers and like trucks that have like the chassis, it's like all one unit essentially. The reason why that's a problem is because if you have a breakdown on the side of the road, you're waiting about 2.5, 3 hours. And that's like, time is money in there. Now, granted, you're going to be safe. And any trucking unit that is worth its weight in salt, is worth its weight in gold, is going to understand you're being safe. You're in a safe haven. If you got to stop for the night, you got to stop for the night, and they'll come out and fix it. That happens. It might be a little bit of money for the trucking company and the freight company, but you know what? That's the price of doing business. But when you're at the rail yard, you can get the stuff solved because they got people on the spot nowadays, like before I left, that actually come out and fix these chassis essentially. So it's something we could do better on, but at least they've got that system in place. That's why I like the intermodal system, because you're not fixing containers, you're fixing the chassis essentially.
Yeah, I largely don't disagree with most of that. I haven't done it personally, but I've seen the facilities firsthand, and you know, you see
Joliet, I know Joliet very well. I know Joliet very well, so.
Yeah, like Chicago actually is really well built out for this, but there's a reason. It's not because they overwhelmingly wanted to be. It's that all of the major railroad companies in the country terminate at Chicago. Mm-hmm. And so either you have to hand off to a trucking company or you have to hand off to another rail company.
Yep.
which our efficiency on that is unfortunately more to be desired.
Yeah.
One of the biggest reasons that Canadian National makes so much money is that they have the only line that goes through Chicago and actually goes all the way down to New Orleans. But they have a place at Effingham, Illinois, and this is the reason I know this is because it's a local. They split off and they go down to a place called Newton, Illinois, and there they hand it off to a small company called Indiana Railroad. And Indiana Railroad will take it from Newton, Illinois, and drive it all the way into southern Indianapolis. When they do that, they have an entire different offloading container facility that's just south of the I-70 and I-65 meeting. And that facility needs to get bigger, but they just offload a bunch of stuff there and they truck it throughout all of basically Indiana, and some of that stuff goes all the way down to Nashville on 65 or Columbus, whatever, and they are making craploads of money. If I remember right, Indiana Railroad, at least for a couple years, was one of the most highest performing Class 2 railroads you could find. It's just, if you have a go-around, if you can just do it even 3% more efficiently, your reward and your returns is so much better. But this country, I hate to say it, we're terrible at infrastructure, and I get it. No one wants to see road construction. It sucks. It slows you down even more, right? It's just like... But our general issue is we don't pay for really good stuff. We're not willing to drop the big money into getting roads that you have to fix at twice or at double the interval.
Yeah.
Because it's prohibitively expensive.
Yeah.
But if we do that, I think a lot of people will find that our infrastructure would be significantly better. But everyone wants to cuss.
It's like going to the dentist. You don't want to go there. You don't want to sit there for long periods of times, but it's 100% necessary. Like, it's one of those things where you respect the people that do the job. Like, I see road construction workers, and I'm like, I could never do that because it's just, and I know it's a hassle. And yes, it sucks, especially when I have places to be, when I have to go make deliveries. But I understand it because I can't want good roads and then complain about them fixing the damn roads. I mean, it's just like...
True, but there's a nasty double-edged sword that we get. Yeah, it's a very nasty double-edged sword that we get out of roads.
Yeah.
When you have a toothache and you go to the dentist, you want to go to the dentist. You want to get that toothache fixed because you're in pain.
Yeah.
But when you're going on to, you get on the roads and you're seeing road construction to fix your problem with your roads, you're in pain because you're going slower, not faster. You'd rather have the beat up road so you can go, you can get up to speed. And it's like, oh, well, it's bumping there. But let's be real. It's always time. Time is your number one concerning thing when you're trying to get from one place to another.
Absolutely.
And that's why I'm talking about those, the upgrades to the rail system. We need to do rails that are more like freeways, to where they're very limited on and off. They only really do that at certain facilities and stations. But if we do that, we'll increase our rail efficiency. We need to really to work on some of our interstate systems. And granted, this is where HSR comes in. If you are in some of these majorly developed, more democratic leaning areas, HSR makes perfect sense. You can literally upgrade Excella. That's the first thing we should have done. It's the thing that we need to do is upgrade the Excella Express, and basically it's New York to DC to HSR. 100%. Go for it. It makes money. We already know. It's the only major profitable line that Amtrak runs is the Excella, and it's great. There's a few other places that looks like it's going to be viable here soon. I don't think the San Francisco Los Angeles route's actually going to be as good as a lot of people think it's going to be, because you've got to punch through the Traverse Mountains. Putting rail through mountains is hard, and basically, if you're going to do it right, you got to dig a 60-mile long tunnel if you're going to do this well. I don't think that's on deck, and I'm very curious to see how this project ends up going for California, because it may end up turning into the biggest public fiasco we've ever had.
What about the LA to Las Vegas one? Because I know they're talking about building a high-speed rail for that.
That one makes a bit more sense. That one's the Brightline West project. And Brightline is actually a company that has just recently finished an express line from Orlando International, which is the major airport, down to basically Miami International.
Yeah.
I'm not... The problem with those two areas is that they don't have hardly any public transit down there. It is very much car country, and in an area where... I'm really sad to say this. I hate Florida's infrastructure. It's one of the worst states in the country because you have so many lakes and funnels that it's really hard not to get from A to B without just running into a crap ton of traffic. And because they basically live in a tropical environment, their roads cost 2 to 3 times more to build, which is why everything's tolled down there.
Yeah.
Dissecting from that, if you had more public transit down there, this may be a different conversation, but I don't know how well Brightline's going to perform. I know there's some people that were really interested in the project, were really hoping it was going to do well, but at least from everyone that I've talked to now, the price is already, not worth doing it. You can literally take the plane from from Miami to Orlando, and it's about the same price, and it's literally even quicker.
Yeah.
You just got to deal with the TSA up your ass. Yeah. So that doesn't look like it's going to go well. The project that I think has room for growth that makes some sense is the Texas Triangle. And the best part about it is that it's a loop. It's not one of these things where you have to go from point to point and back and forth. It's that you can literally just put the trains on the tracks and just keep them running. Because when you have a loop, you don't have to turn it around or have some siding or some wild stuff that really decreases your efficiency. You just, take them on and off when they need maintenance. And if anyone doesn't know what the Texas Triangle is, it's DFW in the north, which is Dallas-Fort Worth. And basically you have it go down the I-35 corridor through some of these major cities that you can have like substations off of, and then down to San Antonio. You make it a hard turn over towards I-10, and then basically have it parallel I-10 over to Houston. And then build it on up from Houston north, up I-45, and back up to DFW. It's a perfectly, it's a perfectly good triangle. All this area is having some of the biggest build out in population and industry that we've seen in this country's history. Here's a current event for you. Year to date, for the last 3 years, we are up 400% in industrial spending.
Okay.
Made in America is coming back, boys. Let's go.
I like it. I'm all about it. But yeah, thinking about that, that triangle right there. I think where they would really make their money is think about all the sports fans, like basketball season, because you've got 3 different teams that play basketball: San Antonio Spurs, Houston Rockets, Dallas Mavericks. You've got 3 teams right there. People could take the transit right there. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Football. You got 2 football teams. You got the Houston Texans and you got the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, that makes perfect sense. I mean, just think about how much money that it pays for itself, essentially, especially if you keep that train running. And most trains I've been on, they are punctual. They are very, very, very punctual. And if you can, actually get people to, sell the idea that it's punctual, people might use it more often, too. I mean, but again, the maintenance is what really, really breaks it down. It's the maintenance of this technology is what's so important. It's so vital. And that's why I say, I always talk about how truck drivers are the heartbeat of America. People that operate the freight systems or the rail lines, they are the blood vessel of America. Without them, we're pretty much screwed, essentially.
Look, I know there's a lot of conversation about essential workers and who actually matters in the economy. Yeah. And people, I think, got a little bit of a taste on this with COVID, but let's be real here. I'll put it this way. You matter, and if you do one of 3 things: if you make somebody something, you get somebody the things they need, or I'm having trouble putting this into words for what the last one is, but it's you provide something for people that they cannot do themselves. So I'm currently an electrician's apprentice. I can make a lot of money here very soon, just out of the sheer fact that nobody knows how to do it anymore. Mm-hmm. My generation was told, you don't want to do that kind of stuff because, you're basically the plumber with the butt crack hanging out and all that. Yep. And back during the late 80s, early 90s, that was true. Yeah. But it's not true anymore. A plumber's going to he's got his own business and he can easily have his own personal take home $60K a year. Yeah. And that's before having the van and all the tools and supplies and all the other shit where if he wants to go help out his buddies and, just do somebody a favor, he's got all the shit to do it. Yeah. Absolutely. So, I think we can just get ready to go and close it down there. So, sure. Tyberius, I just want to know, I thank you so much for coming on last minute. I mean, I definitely do appreciate it. Go ahead and let everybody know where they can find you at and what channels and what social media platforms you're on. Sure, I'm pretty much on every social media platform, at least to some degree. I haven't been very active on most of them for a while, but if you ever want to send me a message on the ones that you're allowed to do so, unless I haven't blocked you because you said something stupid, you definitely can reach out and give me a post and be like, hey, what do you think of this? I tell you what, I try not to talk about things that I don't know about, but I try to bring receipts when I do. Mm-hmm. And if you want to talk about like national security issues, if you want to talk about energy, if you want to talk about infrastructure, I'm definitely good for those things. I'm also a massive nerd. I love Star Wars. I love Star Trek. I like talking about astronomy. Like the place. Just don't talk to me about sports. Good God, fuck sports. I don't care about your sports ball. It doesn't mean anything to me. The only way I'm ever going to care about it is if I'm in the field playing. That's the only way. Literally, it's the only time I'm ever going to give a crap. And that's not going to be the case because I like not having concussions and torn ACUs, ALE, whatever the hell they are.
ACLs.
Yeah, ACLs. Thank you. Yeah, it's just I'm not interested in that. So if you guys have enjoyed what I had to say, if you like me nerdsburging out a little bit, yeah, definitely check me out. I usually will stream on the Twitch and YouTube. You can definitely check out pretty much any of my past content on YouTube. I'm going to give some of this a renovation at some point in the future because all the stuff I want to do, I just don't get any reward for doing on YouTube. So I largely just kind of sit back, shoot the shit with people like Alex here, and just about what I'm thinking about. But if you want to kind of get on that party train of just getting people who are a little bit smarter than the cut above the rest and actually engage with problems of today and hear from a diversity of people, like Alex will totally sign off on this one. I don't have just lefties or righties. I've got a little bit of everybody.
Yep.
And I'll have a dude who is a Marine Harrier pilot talking to Alex about like how the DoD should function, because Alex is a former Marine enlisted guy.
Army.
And then you got I'm sorry, you are Army. I'm being dumb.
It's all right.
I've had problems getting all this correct for day. Yeah, you spent 20 years in the Army. You're enlisted. He's the Marine. He's gonna, he's an officer, and so seeing that cross branch, not only in a rivalry or inter-service rivalry, but also the difference between seeing the enlisted and how the officer corps works together. Oh, that's so much fun.
Yeah.
And if you really want to know how shit works, I'm gonna say it. Come to my stream. Come ask the questions where people actually know something.
Yep.
You might be surprised at how different the world really is than what you think it is.
Absolutely. And I like coming on your stream because like I feel like we can actually have substantive conversations there. A lot of people are kind of drawn to the drama stuff. I like actually having real conversations with people. Let's put it that way. That's why I like doing stuff like this. That's why I brought you on, because I know we're gonna have a good conversation. And, we don't have to agree on everything, and that's fine. That's the beautiful thing of things. I'm not just going to bring people on that agree with me on things. That's no fun. So.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
I'm thankful to have you around. I love chatting with you. And my whole thing here is that if it's not my panel, I'm just not going to largely do anything that has more than 6 people on it anymore.
Yeah.
There's a lot of drama. There's a lot of bad faith arguing. And I think you've all seen it on Twitter. I think you've all seen it on Facebook, is that there's a lot of know-nothings that really like to go around saying things that they don't really know about. And I got time for that shit. I've got bills to pay. I've got a job and a business to build. So,
Preach it, brother. All right. I appreciate you, Tiberius. And